you feel like you don't deserve your success? Do you question your own talents or abilities? You may be feeling imposter syndrome, and this episode is for you. Welcome back to Through the Looking Glass podcast. My name is Lavanya. My goal is to empower listeners, even in the smallest way possible, and improve your well-being. If you find my podcast and enjoying it, please take a minute to follow and rate the show. It lets me know I'm doing a good job. So in this week's episode, I want to talk about imposter syndrome. Ever since I heard this term, I've had mixed feelings about it. I resonate with it, but it also makes me question if I feel this way. Is this something only women feel, or is it an immigrant experience? I'm still on this journey to figure it out, and I'm going to share what I learned so far. To start with, what does imposter syndrome even mean? The Oxford definition of imposter syndrome is the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. Basically, you feel like you're not as talented or worthy as others believe you are, and you're worried people are going to find out that you're fake. The concept of imposter phenomenon was first coined by researchers Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes in 1978. Where they studied 150 white women who earned PhDs. Despite receiving praise from others, these women continued to believe they were not as bright and had achieved their success from sheer luck, and somehow everyone overestimated their intelligence and capability. This study was focused only on women, which I felt like was solution-driven and maybe even displayed some confirmation bias. I do think any gender can experience it, or maybe it's more common in minorities or underprivileged members of our society. It can manifest in different ways. One example is an employee who thinks they do not deserve a raise or promotion despite putting in years of work and success. Maybe your boss even recommends you for a lead role, and you feel you can't do it. Another example is with students when they feel out of place amongst their classmates, even though everyone is taking the same classes and exams. Another sign is fearing you're going to be found out and your friends will realize you are a fake or you don't deserve them. This might result in you putting in more hours than everyone else on your team or class in an attempt to prove yourself, or even saying yes to a lot of volunteering activities or workshops to boost your own worth in your team. These signs also tie into being a workaholic and perfectionist, right? The surprising sign might be procrastination. This is tricky because we all get a little lazy, but I think if you are procrastinating as a coping strategy to prolong your inevitable failure, that's likely tied to your imposter syndrome. In my opinion, the clearest sign of imposter syndrome may be this. Do you ever catch yourself thinking, I'm a fraud. I don't deserve to be here. Am I smart enough to be here? This internal voice is the core of imposter syndrome, and you attribute external factors or luck to why you got something. Rather than acknowledging your own hard work, that voice is leading you to think, I don't know what I'm doing. Underneath all of these signs is this negative core belief that is causing this imposter syndrome in adulthood. This experience is common with high achievers doubting themselves. Ironically, an undeserving person would never doubt if they deserve something, even if they got it by taking shortcuts. A quick story time. When I was in my undergraduate degree, my core year in my engineering major was like 90% male. I believe we had 11 women in the graduating class, so I think I'm pretty close on the percentage. I remember as a sophomore, I didn't really have a tribe. There was definitely a boys club, and they would do all of their homework together, and it was unwelcoming. Luckily, I found my major bestie, who I quickly became study buddies with, and we have a beautiful friendship. But that's not the focus of this story. What I felt as a 19-year-old was a need to prove myself, and a lot of doubt. I constantly felt like I was not as smart as my male peers. Not only was I doubting my own success, despite passing all my courses with great grades. Of course, some classes I struggled in, but I got some A's and B's, which is actually pretty hard to do in engineering school. Maybe there were some perfectionism tendencies here too. I did feel that I'm not smart enough thoughts for years. A few years passed by and I got to know my peers better. Internship season came around, etc. And during my senior year, I came to some realizations. I realized that I was actually smarter than a lot of my male peers, especially the ones who made me feel like I don't belong. I got my internships and great job offers. I figured out that the people who I thought were smarter than me were actually struggling in school and had no job offers. It was like the facade vanished and I grew into being a lot more confident in my own success. This is one phase of my life I truly felt imposter syndrome, and over time I did move past it. I feel like the premise of imposter syndrome seems to be indicating that there are these underlying messages from society that women or minorities do not belong in powerful or ambitious positions or careers. The moral of this story time is everyone doubts themselves, and it comes from a place of fear. You are probably doing better in life than you realize, so stop second guessing everything. You wouldn't be getting these opportunities if you didn't display your merits. I also want to talk about some signs that indicate you don't have imposter syndrome. This might look like you are actually a beginner or a student. You feel uncertain and a little anxious. Maybe you're starting a new job or a new degree. The temporary feeling is natural, especially in the learning phase around the first 6 months or so. I think people mistake that as imposter syndrome, so give yourself grace. Another sign is you do feel confident in your own abilities and achievements, but you downplay it externally. Some people may call that being humble, but I also think women are socially conditioned to downplay themselves. It could be cultural or societal fear of exclusion for hyping yourself up, which does happen to women more often. I personally think women should work on bragging a lot more, but ultimately not a sign of imposter syndrome. Maybe there's a balance to sharing your accomplishments that's not obnoxious, which most people aren't anyways. I wanted to hit on these elements because the term has so much hype in recent years, and there's a lot of incorrect self diagnosis. It's entirely possible that you don't have imposter syndrome and you just think that you do. So hopefully this chapter is clarifying what you may or may not be experiencing. In my attempt to better understand imposter syndrome, I put together this guide to overcome it. Next time you feel inadequate in some way, let's examine it. Maybe you got a promotion or employee of the month. Your boss and coworkers are complimenting you, but you feel the urge to say, I didn't do much. But instead, I want you to say, thank you, I'm excited for this opportunity. You need to tell yourself, I worked hard and I deserve it. Write it on a sticky note and put it on your monitor if you need to. We talked about how the signs of imposter syndrome is because of negative core thinking. So we need to rewire this mindset. That starts with understanding these feelings of doubt and inadequacy. Ask yourself these questions when you are in a scenario like this example. Number one, what do you feel? Number two, what need isn't being met? Number three, what are you secretly afraid of and why? Number four, what's really going on? Number five, deep down, what do you believe about yourself? The answers to these questions will help you understand your thoughts better. Maybe you ended up on, I'm not smart enough to deserve this win, or I'm not worthy of love. The response to the fifth question is key to your homework in this episode. Do this prompt every day or weekly, whatever works best for you. Make a list answering, I'm a smart person because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you answer whatever you did that day or week that proves you're a smart person. That prompt would be whatever your core negative belief is. You are basically collecting evidence to counteract your negative thoughts. Rewiring your thoughts is hard work, and you won't get there overnight. So you might be doing this for years, which is totally fine. All that matters is you are becoming more self-aware and growing. I think this prompt is a great one to add to your 5-minute guide to journaling. Maybe stick to writing 3 things for this prompt every day to keep it simple. I hope this exercise helps kick imposter syndrome out of your system. I'm curious to know if there's other exercises that worked for you, and I would love to hear from listeners. Speaking about imposter syndrome reminds me of this graduation speech I heard on social media by Reshma Saujani. So I wanted to share the story here. In response to the question, how to overcome imposter syndrome, Reshma shares a story from 1890s about a medical condition called bicycle face that only women got. The invention of the bicycle takes off, particularly for women, which increase their mobility. The symptoms of bicycle face are flushed cheeks, clenched jaw, bulging eyes, and a stony expression. Men rode these bicycles too, but bicycle face was only affecting women. The rise of women riding bicycles gave the suffragettes freedom to go to places easier, and it grew into the symbol of feminism. They didn't have to depend on men to commute, and that opened up options for women. We can see now that bicycle face was invented to scare women from being independent. It is not a medical condition, but a strategy to put women back in their place. Reshma compares bicycle face to imposter syndrome, both as strategies to hold women back. By the way, imposter syndrome is not a medical or mental condition. The concept came about in the 70s, as I explained earlier in the episode, which was around the same time as Roe v. Wade, Title X in education was passed. The concept came about in the 70s, like I explained earlier in the episode, which was around the same time as Roe v. Wade and Title X in education was passed, which doesn't feel like a coincidence, right? Reshma's theory is imposter syndrome is not an individual's problem, rather a societal pain point we need to collectively solve. I found this dialogue to be profound. It makes you think what the origin of imposter syndrome is. Is it an actual deficiency, or is there validity to these doubts? It's really hard being the first or a minority in the workplace, which is one of the many reasons I wanted to make this video. Underrepresented groups don't have the same resources and tools as their white counterparts. I can speak from personal experience working in corporate America. I did not have the same advantage as my male peers, right? And it's totally natural to enter these environments as a minority and feel like you don't belong. You don't see people who look like you around you. Maybe this is driving these fears of failure and inadequacy. I think there's a larger dialogue to be encouraged here. Challenging and questioning these theories is equally important as to doing the inner work. Today's episode is filled with story times, understanding imposter syndrome, and learning how to overcome this mindset. I know it's a mix of different formats, but I wanted to share different perspectives and add flavor to this topic. I hope you found this insightful, helpful, and interesting to listen or watch. That's all I have for this week's episode on Through the Looking Glass podcast. Wherever you are in the world, thank you so much for tuning